Hey, what's happening? Robert Phoenix. Welcome to this video. If you guys know Andy Edwards, you know that's Andy Edwards. Welcome to this video. If you don't know Andy Edwards, go find him. He's awesome. And I've been told that we're from the same tribe, apparently. And I would agree with that. Anyway, not a lot to talk about. What the hell are we going to talk about tonight? It's kind of a boring astrological world, isn't it? No, it's not. It's not, Robert. It's far from being boring. Come on, mate. Wake up. Step up your game. Yeah, what is there not to talk about? Jesus, my God. There's almost too much to talk about. When you break it down, right? There's almost too much. In fact, the reason I'm late is because I was actually working on another show. Well, it was going to be this show, but now it has to be another show because the material for that show is quite involved. And I have like over 30 images that I want to use. And it's related to the movie Children of Men. And I think it's like incredibly appropriate for where we are now, particularly after what happened in Leeds last week, where the inevitable happened, right? I mean, so when there is a group of people, when you got a group of people that are introduced to a new area, and slowly but surely over time, their numbers begin to swell, and they begin to realize that they have a numbers advantage over the people whose land they're now occupying. Guess what happens? Yeah, Leeds. And I'm sure that there were things that triggered the whole situation, but it's really a numbers game when it comes down to it. And when I saw that, it was like, okay, here we go. Children of Men in 3, 2, 1. So I rented the movie last night and we watched it. I actually own it, but I was away from home because I was thinking, okay, I'm going to do a show on this tonight. And it's like, if you haven't seen it, it's one of the most powerful movies, and going through it almost frame by frame, which is what I did today, grabbing images. It's not only a powerful movie, but the way that it's shot it's art. Like it's like high art, and it's an exercise in like world building, right? It's this dystopic story about the future, and a future where there are no more children. And there's no reason really why it's given that there are no more children. However, they do mention the flu as being related to a period of sterility, which lasts roughly 18 years, right? So I'm going to get into it next week because I just want to make sure that I have all the images lined up and ready to go. I think it'll be a really worthwhile show because I think there's a lot happening in that movie that is really, it almost seems prophetic in some ways, especially as it relates to Neptune and Pisces and the last degrees of Neptune. So we'll get into that next week. But tonight, the title of the show is The Breakaway Civilization. And I'm kind of playing with the title. Richard Dolan wrote a book about the Breakaway Civilization. I know you guys probably know who Richard Dolan is. Of all the UFO guys, I think he's one of the ones that I can actually sit down and listen to and say, okay, he's not a crank, right? Like he seems pretty level-headed. I think I've even been in the same physical room with him at least once. And he had I don't know if he still has a bookstore in Arizona, but I think he had a bookstore in Arizona. He's got his own press. And so he wrote a book called The Breakaway Civilization as it relates to Space Force and UFOs and, this sort of secret technology, right? Like what Ben Rich talks about, who was the guy that was in charge of Lockheed Skunk Works. And I don't know, if you don't know the story, it's a very interesting story. So Ben Rich was the head of Lockheed Skunk Works, which was the best of the best at Lockheed, like the best metallurgists, the best programmers. the best engineers, right? Like they got the best of the best, and they had their own group. And Ben Rich was the head of it. And so there's a story that on his deathbed, he spilled some of the tea. And the tea was that yeah, they have free energy, and it would take an act of God to pry it from their hands. He said that. He said, number two, not only have we been to the stars, okay, now for all you people, all you dome people, right, all you firmament people, just set that aside for a minute, right? So not only have we been to the stars, but we have colonized them, right? And how basically this is what he says. Now, just keep in mind, right, that the way that they figured it out is they figured out something about Einstein and the quote unquote theory of relativity, and it's really about like folding space, right? Like whatever that is, folding. Like, so for instance, if the individual who is basically the individual is almost like the engine in the craft, right? So the whole thing takes place through the individual. So it's not really just like external space or extraterrestrial space, but internal space as well. So I'm just telling you what he said, right? Like that these things were part of Lockheed Skunk Works, the last confessions of a dying man. So we've talked about this before. And supposedly, right, according to Richard Dolan, is that Space Force is a component that is connected to all of that, which is also connected to this idea of the breakaway civilization. Now, if you've ever seen the movie Elysium, this is what I'm talking about. Now, in Elysium, the breakaway civilization is in orbit around Earth, and Earth is very dystopic. And what they've done is they've created this realm that orbits the planet, and they've also been able to extend their life, right? Which is a big part of Peter Thiel's program, is life extension. So I don't necessarily see the breakaway civilization as a extraterrestrial or terrestrial like quest for the stars, although Elon Musk clearly does, right? He has this Mars wet dream. And he's not part of the male, but he probably should be, right? I see the breakaway civilization much more internal, like that there are a group of people who have tremendous amounts of assets and resources, tremendous amounts of technology at their disposal. And as a result of that, all they need to do is to be able to get into the political system and begin to flex the political system so that they can begin to build their breakaway civilization inside of the one that we're already in. So that's how I'm looking at the breakaway civilization. And Peter Thiel is one of the drivers, one of the pilots of the breakaway civilization. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to look at, I don't have Peter Thiel's birth time, but I do know when he was born, where he was born, and what his date of birth is. And if you overlay Peter Thiel's chart on top of J.D. Vance's chart and Donald Trump's chart, it's very illuminating, to say the least, right? And I was able to get J.D. Vance's birth time. Somebody on the Twitter world, there was an astrologer in the Twitter world who went in and he's got his own world. He's just on Twitter, right? But he went in to where J.D. Vance, he didn't go in there, but he called him up and somehow was able to get J.D. Vance's birth time as part of the records, which was really good and something I need to remember and figure out, because that was like some really stealthy shit. And so we have a birth time for J.D. Vance. So that's good. So we have a birth time for Vance, we have a birth time for Trump, and then we have Peter Thiel, who we're going to look at tonight as well. Obviously, we're going to spend some time looking at the Biden thing, which we talked about. Friday. flash drive weather. We talked about it, and I knew Biden was starting. Once whatever happened in Butler, Pennsylvania, right? It was done. It was done. And I talked about this timeline change, and this timeline change has been really, really weird. Really weird. Okay. If you look at the show that I did on Friday, I actually have the date as being 2025, not on the thumbnail, but on the description for the YouTube show. I was like, and somebody pointed that out to me. I didn't do it on purpose, and it was like weird. It's like, why did I put 25 in there? It's just this whole. I got to tell you, man, these syncs and this whole timeline shift thing. It's just been so fucking weird. Right. Okay. Let me give you an example. And God bless this person. I hope she's doing okay. I really do. I'm not sharing this so I can, belittle this person. But it was somebody who apparently, and again, I must have had her as a client at one point in time. I must have had her as a client. And I started getting these texts starting, I think it was last Thursday on my show. Like, and if you listen, you can hear me like read about this text, right? I'm like reading this text, and I'm getting like these, SOS alert messages from this person, and I have no idea what's going on with them, why they're reaching out to me, right? Like client, maybe once, maybe twice, but why are they reaching out to me? I don't understand this. But I'm not, kicking them to the curb. I'm just saying, hey, look, if you're really in dire straits, right? You can call me back. And I never got a phone call back. And then the next thing I know, I get another series of text. And eventually, the text is, I've checked myself into rehab. I'm like, wow. And then I'm like, well, who did it? No, I'm in rehab. That's right. I'm in rehab. And I said, well, who did it? Did somebody, do an intervention, or did you do it yourself? And this person said, I did it myself. I'm like, okay, all right. Well, I guess you whatever sort of trauma you've been going through, I guess now you're in a place, right? So then I get another kind of SOS email, which is really weird, right? But then finally I get this other, text, not email. Then I get this other text, and she thinks that I guess I'm her ex-lover or something, because she's apologizing. I guess she's in this apology phase now for whatever, like, I don't know. She's like coming to terms with things in her life. So she's apologizing for the relationship that we supposedly had. But I'm not that person. Right? You understand what I'm saying? So like in a weird way, it was this strange kind of like timeline thing. Like all of a sudden in this other timeline, I'm like now her ex-lover or boyfriend or husband. I don't know what her relationship was, right? It was really weird, like really strangely out of the blue. Really strangely out of the blue. So but it went on for a long time. It was really, really strange. But the syncs were just, they kept on coming, and they're still there. I was watching Whitney Webb with Tom, Tom, and we were watching the Jimmy Dore interview. And there's this one thing that Whitney Webb does with her mouth, which is really weird. She does this thing with her mouth. It's almost like it's too big, like her teeth are too big for her mouth. And her mouth is about half the size of her face. And I said to Tom, I said, you know what she reminds me of? She reminds me of like Clutch Cargo, which was this old cartoon where they would have one just animated still. It was still, I mean, not even animated. It was just like a cell. And then what they would do is they'd stick people's mouths into the mouth of the cartoon character and move it, right? Have you guys seen that? It's like, that's what she reminded me of. So I'm telling Joan about this, and I'm showing her, the Clutch Cargo thing. And then later that night, we're watching like a repeat of It was like highlights of MTV from 1983. And one of the shows that they had, one of the tracks that they had was Robert Palmer looking for clues. And during the track, he puts a magnifying glass up to his mouth and does that thing with his mouth, and his mouth becomes really huge. And it's like, there's no Robert Palmer, there's just the mouth talking. And it's like, there we go, right? Sync City. We were in Sync City. And we are in total Sync City. Went to Costco today and checking out. I'm looking at Costco and I do my credit card, debit card. And I asked the person behind the register, I said, did you change your point of sale? And she said, yeah, we did. Why? I said, because that's been happening everywhere, right? If you go back and listen to like Friday show primarily, but I was talking about Thursday. On Thursday, I was talking about how all these interfaces have changed. Rumble changed, YouTube changed, CBS Sports changed, like all these interfaces, Apple Store, like all these fucking updates happened, right? Even the interface, like these point of sales have changed. And this is all prior to the crunch. It's like, oh, isn't this interesting? Isn't this interesting? My neighbor across the street does websites and IT stuff, right? And before, this is like 2 or 3 days before all this happens, Tom and I walk out, and she's bringing her cans in. So we start to have this conversation. And she says, oh, we've got to move our server. We're doing something with our server. We got to do it. I'm like, oh, is it on Linux? She said, no, unfortunately, it's on Microsoft, right? So this is just like days before all this whole thing happened. And now I don't know like what the story was behind her having to change, move her server and her web-based stuff or whatever, right? But it's just like this is kind of a layer of reality that has become very interesting over the last couple of weeks. Now, one of the things, I'm going to get in chat. I'm going to say hi to you guys. I know we get some birthdays. Peter Bion, my brother. Happy birthday. Happy solar return. Here's a little Zevia toast to you. So a lot of people talk about the simulation. The simulation. We're in the simulation, right? And the idea that it's all just one thing, I think, is limited, right? It's limited. And we got into that on Monday night with Longo, right? So, where is the interface with the divine, with this idea of the simulation? And then ultimately, if you're just pure simulation, then you're just, in a lot of ways, you're just a materialist and you're a nihilist and nothing really matters, right? Unless, of course, you're a Gnostic and you relate it back to the archonic universe, and then it begins to make more sense, right? But that said, I had an experience one time in my life where I was able to literally, in my sleep, I had one of these lifetime dreams where I literally walked through this like wall of plasma. It was clear, right? Like energy, like rippling energy. It was kind of all moving in one direction. And I walked through that wall and I realized that I was living a life on the other side of that wall. There was another me that was living on the other side of that wall. And I knew everything about that me. And it was startling, right? And then I had some experiences which validated that out of the blue. I don't want to get into it. It's too like whatever, right? But when we talk about reality, this idea of reality, well, it's either a simulation or it's like, this divine creation. And I think it's a lot more complex than that, right? I think that we are living in multiple realities, multiple timelines. And what we're witnessing, this is just my guess, right? My intuition. This is my, 2-4 generator, right? 2-4 splenic generator intuition gut. Like we are merging into a new timeline. And does it also correspond with the breakaway civilization? Well, I guess we're about to find out, right? We're about to find out. But here's what I think is really important is that a lot of times we have our eyes, fixed on the horizon, right? So it's Trump or it's Biden or it's JD Vance, it's Peter Thiel. We're going to talk about all that tonight, right? So those things are worth talking about. But I think what happens is that we kind of lose ourselves in some ways, right? Because we're kind of caught up in the churn, of this political drama and, whatever we think is going on, right? Well, on the other hand, there's all these other realities and all these other things that are happening kind of in parallel or underneath this experience. And I used to be like totally synced up long time ago. And over time, I'd have, very intense periods of syncs. Now they're just like coming at me, right and left. And usually when that happens, there's like it's what I would call like a novelty engine, right? And this novelty engine is really speeding up. And, we're on a fast track now for something, right? We're on this fast track for something. And I think the challenging part is that it's this drama, right? It's this passion, this political passion play that's around us. And some of it is part of it, right? Some of it is part of it because what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania, whatever you think about Trump and what happened, it was a game changer. It changed the timeline. Well, why do we know that? Because Joe Biden dropped out. That's why. Joe Biden dropped. Whoever was behind it, whatever malfeasance, right? Kimberly Cheadle, DHS, Jill Biden, whatever, right? Whoever's behind the malfeasance. At the end of the day, Joe Biden dropped out. Now, if Trump, number one, gets plunked or whatever, right? Like that doesn't happen. Number two, he's gone. And Joe Biden stays in the race. Now we might have a civil war in our hands, but that's a whole other drama, right? Or let's say Thomas Matthew Crooks, or whoever the tower shooter was or whatever. Let's say they're not even there. And that's quite possible. Then guess what? Trump gives a speech, right? There's no drama. There's no death and resurrection moment, right? And then Biden stays in the race because it's not such a insurmountable, gap, which is really what it's turned into. So I think that was really important because it changed everything. There was still some degree of possibility, right? That Biden, and I really felt like Biden was going to stay in this to the end. Like he was going to stay in it to the end. And his people were, locked in. Remember, he's a Scorpio. We talked about that. We talked about the scorpion and the frog and the poison and the toxicity that was seeping into the Democratic Party. He was going to take the party down, literally down with him. And had that not happened on last Saturday, we're not talking about this, right? We're talking about probably Biden staying in the race, and then them thinking they have enough of a cushion to, pad the stats at the end of the game, which is what they did last time. Now there's no way. There's no way that they can pad the stats. It's kind of like, the Belmont Stakes and Donald Trump is secretariat. And Joe Biden is the nearest horse. And he's like 20 lengths behind. And in racing, that's a lot of lengths. That's kind of what it is now. So they're going to have to do something extremely dramatic in order to try to close the gap. And again, there's like, well, it's all just scripted and it's all fake. I think that there are factions that are, vying for power. They're vying for power. you've got the sort of the quote unquote Democratic faction and the Republican faction. Go on the Democratic side, you'll find faction within faction within faction. That's it. You'll find them in there. Like you know, the Biden family was they were enclaved, right? They were enclaved, and they were not going to budge. And you had these other factions that wanted them out. So you can see that inside the Democratic Party. You're going to see a Harris faction. You're going to see other factions. So you're going to start to see that, right? It's in the Republican Party as well. So you have these factions that more or less compete against one another at a high level, right? And then you have factions within factions, and sometimes they even work together. I mean, this is the gang model. A lot of times gangs would work together, and then sometimes they put hits out on each other. It's just the way it is. I don't think it's any different, except instead of like Tommy guns and 9mm or whatever, these people use very sophisticated technology, extremely sophisticated technology to either affect or bend the outcome of what they want to happen, or they use the technology to criticize, smear, set a person up, maybe even, technologically kill them, right? With some form of advanced weaponry, which we know that they have. They talked about having the heart gun, the poison dart heart gun, back in the 1970s when they were doing the MK Ultra hearings. That was just the 1970s. How far has it come from there? So anyway, we're in for a wild ride. And I think on Friday, I talked about the next 4 months as being like the gauntlet. We're in the gauntlet now. So let me get into chat. Thank you for letting me kind of, get my chops started here. And my chops, let's get into chat. Oh, by the way, if you haven't checked out Astro Dads from yesterday on the channel, it's really great. My guy, Astrologic, did a great job. And I think it was one of our best shows so far. Really good. All right. Who's in the house? Susie G. Chat is scrolling fast. That's right. Charlie's here. Kabuki Theater. What's up, Bo? Janice Phillips. What's up, JP? There she is, the lovely and talented one, saving Austin one tooth at a time. Dr. Joan S. There's my man, Ryan. Brandy Herrera. My cousin bought a rancho here 20 years ago. Cool. There's a man, Tom Jordan. Let's see. Who else do we have? Julie Sunshine. 333. Big Cat Lady. What's happening, Julie? Hope you're doing well. Big Sky. We got Aunt Susan Wade in the house. Oh, the Waits are in the house. Very cool. Good to see him. Healing Heart Rosie. Scott Ann. Hey, Scott. Good morning. Where is Scott? He's in some morning world somewhere. There's my man Ryan. What's going on, brother Ryan? Cynthia Cluth, Claire. Who else we have in the house? Did I say hi to Bo? Hi, Bo. There she is. Susan Waits. What's happening? Jennifer Mola. Greetings, Jennifer. Dead Wolf Resistance 13. Well, that is a serious name right there. Dead Wolf Resistance 13. Like that. Secret Law 2007. Huzzah back. We gotta acknowledge a huzzah. How to whiten 60-year-old choppers. 66. It's called bleach. It's called bleach. And there is a formula. So Peter asked, Peter, we're going to do a little happy birthday tune, brother. But so are they really going to run Kamala? They got a big issue with Kamala. They have a big issue. And it's the eligibility issue. I think there's an eligibility issue with Kamala. Now, would it be enough to pump the brakes and say, okay, well, we can't do this? I don't know. It'll be very interesting to see how that, because she's basically an anchor baby. That's what she is. Neither of her parents are American. So it says she was born in Oakland, California on her Wikipedia, but according to Joan, and I've never seen this, there was originally a different birthplace and they scrubbed it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with just the eligibility issue alone. We looked at Kamala's chart a couple of weeks ago, and it was not a popular summation of her chart, but on election night, we can run it back again if you want. But on election night, transiting Jupiter is on her ascendant, which is pretty fortuitous, I have to say. Now, it is retrograde, just like it's retrograde for Donald Trump on his sun. But, again, the whole idea and concept was, on election night, Jupiter conjunct Kamala's Gemini ascendant retrograde goes into the 12th house. There could be a period where the election is disputed. And I think it's still in the mix, right? It is still in the mix. And then it comes out, once it's resolved. And by the way, that takes a while to resolve that, but it is resolved. I believe it's resolved in January. And then it moves forward and it hits her ascendant again. So like that, I think that's possible. That's a possibility. But again, it all depends upon how they deal with this whole eligibility issue. And I think we're going to get a really interesting insight into what's going to go on with the Democratic Party. And we'll see these various factions inside the Democratic Party. Now, one of the things that I read was that apparently, like one of the key reasons that Kamala is there, not just because she represents a demographic, which I guess in their mind is important, it should be the black female vote, right? Like she is the DEI vote. I think we could all pretty much agree on that. But somebody had a DEI hard, like Die Hard, with the woman who was the Secret Service person. It was hilarious meme. Anyway, there's more than just her being the DEI candidate, and more than just her being connected to the Obamas, and even the San Francisco power base. She's connected in there with Nancy Pelosi and all these people because those are the ranks that she rose up from. But apparently, and I don't have the exact case on this, but apparently when she was the Attorney General of California, there was a case that was put before her, and it had to do with one of these Soros groups. And they were being accused of money laundering. And she passed on prosecuting the case, which was huge. Like it was one of those cases that could have really been the spear of Longinus in the side of the Soros Foundation. And she passed on it. So from what I understand, number one, it's a political payback. And number two, she's got all the receipts on it. Plus, her husband is like really, really deeply connected to the whole immigration thing. Douglas Emmer is part of a global legal group, very powerful, extremely powerful. Like, in order to understand Kamala, you have to understand her husband. Like that guy is wired up and he's connected to the whole immigration thing. So there's a lot more behind Kamala than people understand, which is why, she could be the odds-on favorite if they can get past the eligibility thing. Now, I have a wild card and a dark horse, which I'm going to talk about later in the show, called the tease. It's a tease. Let me see if I can find a birthday song for Peter. And how about everybody else tonight who's having a birthday? Let's do one shotter for all the birthdays today. Let's get that out of the way. In a good way. Not just, let's get it out of the way. Let's get it out of the way. Now we'll skip the 2 Chainz version of the birthday song. What would be fitting? What would be fitting of Peter Bayonne? How about this? I don't know. This sounds fitting for Peter. Because Peter's a rock and roller, right? Peter is a rock and roll guy. So we're going to play. I've never heard this before. First time seeing it. I might even get dinged for it, but who knows? Who cares? Peter and everybody else tonight whose birthday it is, you're worth it. It's Guns N' Roses. Happy birthday song.
We just have to do this. This is our new manager, and this is our first show, and we thought we'd never make it. This is his birthday. This is real fucking embarrassing for him. Happy birthday, Ducky! We love you. What's a duck, man? I've never played that shit before, so I'm gonna have to thank you. This is something called Dead Horse.
All right, there you go, Peter. Little slash on the happy birthday side. I hope that worked for you. All right. I think we have another birthday tonight, too. Who else we have here? Claire. Hi, Claire. Mary Lee in the house. California contrarian. 11-degree Leo sun. Yeah, happy birthday, all the Leos coming in right now. It's Leo time. Rosie, healing heart Rosie, making that wormwood tincture for parasites and brain cancer. There you go. You got to be prepared. Let's see who else we have. Kelly Meduse. Hey, what's happening? Just got off the Middle Fork of the Flathead in Northwest Montana. Awesome. That sounds awesome, right? Middle Fork of the Flathead. Sounds great. Let's see who else do we have. Steve Borg Resistance. I don't know if it was Steve Borg or Steve Letro. Somebody bought me some coffee. If either of you bought me the coffee, thank you. Appreciate it. I saw that come up on Twitter the other day. Dr. Laura. Hey, Dr. Laura. What's going on? Wormwood cured my bowel 20 years ago. Can I buy a bowel? Alex, I'd like a bowel, please. I'd like to buy a bowel, please. All right, let's see. Uh-oh. Peachy let Tom pet her today. Wow, that's a huge first. Huge first. Let's see. Who else we have? Secret Law 007, 2007. What's up, Secret Law? Who else do we have? There it is. It's going to be 57. Feeling almost as clueless as when I was 17. That's an honest assessment of one's life. Amen. I hope you liked your song. Let's see. Glemma Spank. What's happened, Glemma? Moonsprout. Mary Ducina. Who else we got? Lynette Jardine. Matt Maxine. What's happening? Misbehaving 2. Super Gradiator. I like that name. Barbara Boots. He is Thiel. Rhymes with heel and squeal. What do you think Peter Thiel's sex life is like? I bet it's weird. I bet it's pretty weird. Let's see. Sandra Jack Shaw. What's happening, SJS? My man, Mark S. We can't wait to get him on so we talk about his new book. We await eagerly. Sandy D. What's going on, Sandy D? Here he is, DJ MC. Brother Mike, what's happening? Kelly B. She's here. Kaleidoscope Kara. That's a new name. Unless I haven't been paying attention. Welcome. Look at that. My herd of 13 cows arrived today. Beautiful. Speaking of animals and agriculture, we got Jake, Gucci the Goats. She's here with us tonight. The original Queen Lisa checking in from Florida. Liddy Lou, welcome to the Blue Full Moon. Indeed. Shelley Myers here. Hi, Shelley. Jackie Delario, the Empress of South Jersey. She's joined us. Let's see. Night's Light, you were right about Biden stepping down. Yep. Yep. Your boy is pretty accurate most of the time. Most of the time. I try not to open my mouth unless I'm pretty sure. You know, hey, look, there are times like I actually thought Kamala would have been president by now with the Saturn transit through Aquarius and her Saturn return. I really thought she'd been something would have happened by now, but yeah, he's gone. He gone. Neil Lemuria. That's a cool name. I like that. Welcome, Robin Dan. Hot Dan. Checking in from NYC. What's going on, Robin? Anyone see the Kennedys endorsing Kamala? They looked and sounded inbred. I died laughing at the tweet responses. That's a really interesting observation about the Kennedys. The inbred part. That makes a lot of sense. My guy down the Wombat Hole is here. Checking in from Oz territory. Good to see you. Audio not good. Is the audio all right? Is the audio cool? It's a bit warbly. Well, I've got it. We got it all hooked up here. Oh, I know why. I know why. I know why. It's because it was under my shirt. Let me do it differently here. Hold on. All right. Let me see now. Is that better? Is that better? Let me get to the end of the comments. Is that better? He's married to a gay gentleman, loves Lord of the Rings. Thiel paid for the best money ever spent. Yeah, because Gawker outed him, right? He outed him. Let's see. Is this better? Is this better? Yes, clear. Okay, good. All right. Thanks for letting me know. Let's see. JFK Jr. died on July 16th, very close to June 17th. Yes, and that was a notice, right? Total notice. Okay. All right. Hippocratic Oath. This is a great handle right there. I love that handle. Let's see. Who else do we have? I'm just scrolling backwards. Sam's here. What's going on, Sam? Catherine Rosen. Joe Potter. What's going on, Joe Potter? Let's see. Who else? Nora Sheet, the Queen of Speed. She's in the house. Wormwood is kind of psychedelic. Using that. I went through an absinthe phase. It was when it's when I got divorced. You know, I'm like, if I'm gonna drink after I get divorced, I'm gonna drink some good fucking shit. Let me get some absinthe. And it was just a phase. Just a phase. Okay, let me get into, let's look at the chart of the moment. Peter Thiel. Let's see. We got plenty on Peter. Plenty on Peter. Let's see what we got here. You know, I know that I may annoy some people sometimes because I don't always toe the party line. You know what I'm saying? I don't always toe the party line. That doesn't mean that I am not either optimistic or hopeful. Doesn't mean that, right? But it does mean that I have something inside of me genetically, which makes me go through things and question certain things. And having the question in bringing things to the table shouldn't theoretically invalidate what a particular experience might be. Right? Like, again, I've talked about this, how most people, not all of them, Most people cannot hold 2 point of views simultaneously at the same time. I can't. And I would say it's really hard even to do like 51-49 because you're always going to have some bias one way or the other. It's, splitting it right down the middle is not always the easiest thing to do, right? But most people can't do that. So what happens is that when you begin to question something and bring it up, they automatically believe that you're a complete rejection of the thing that you're questioning. Because that is the polaric response. Well, if you're questioning this, you're bringing it up, well, you must be against it. Well, that's not necessarily true, right? It just means that I am invested in asking questions, in pondering things. And, I've kind of worked on being able to hold 2 points of view simultaneously. And it doesn't mean I'm not committed to anything either. I am committed to something, but it may not always be like the party line. This may not always be the party line. This is the way it is. This goes back to a long time ago, like 2016. And I used to be good friends with Eddie Lynn. And I'm sure some of you who have, gone through Sync Book and all that stuff, some of you might be aware of Eddie Lynn. Eddie Lynn is brilliant. He's totally brilliant. He's an incredible cartoonist and animator, and breaking things down. Eddie's just like, he's really next level, and I really respect his ability to do that. I haven't talked to Eddie in a long time. He's the nicest guy, really nice guy. And he was starting. This is back in 2016, and he was sounding the alarm with Trump. And, he was like, hey, you got to watch out for this guy, and, on and on and on. And I'm like, okay, well, first of all, who's the alternative? Well, it's Hillary. Right. And then really what what I was about in 2016 with Trump is, hey, look, there's some energy here. It's very disruptive, which is good. It's really disruptive. And it's like, yeah. All right, I'm into the energy. But I didn't necessarily have to attach to the person who was connected to the energy. You understand what I'm saying? Like, for me, it was more energetic than it was Trump. Trump became like the I don't know, the conductor or the lightning rod for the disruption. And that's how I saw him. Right? Apart from anything else, that's how I saw him. And so for me, it was like, okay, I'm not going to get attached to Trump. I'm just not. But I will be invested in the energy because it was breaking patterns. If you go, and I talked about this, before, it was after the election, before and even after the election. If you go back and you look at what was happening in the year 1990, George Bush gets elected. You also had essentially probably about 8 years of George Bush inside of the Reagan White House, having some flex. Like, he had some flex inside the Reagan White House. So then, but we'll start with 1990. So you get 4 years of George Bush, and then he's a theoretically a one-term president. You might say that he was maybe a 3-term president if you factor in his involvement in the Reagan administration, which was, I think, significant. Then you've got 8 years of Clinton, which by proxy is another 8 years of Bush, because we know that the Bushes and the Clintons, right? Like, he talks about, oh, well, Bill Clinton's like my son-in-law or whatever. All right, so now you have 8 years of the Clintons. Then you get 8 years of another Bush. Look at that. 8 years of another Bush. So you got 8 years of Bush, 8 years of Clinton. That's 16. You got 4 years of Bush. That's 20. Then you have the indeterminate amount of years of Bush and Reagan. And then we get to Obama. And what do we see at the funeral of George H.W. Bush? All three of those families are sitting together. Who does Obama hire as his Secretary of State? Hillary Clinton. So why don't we, and then you've got, George H.W. Bush getting all googly with Michelle Obama, right? I mean, like, that's a whole thing unto itself. But so let's just say 8 years of Obama is also 8 years of Bush and 8 years of Clinton. So now we've got 16, 24, 4 years worth of Bush, plus minus the 8 years or whatever. We're just going to go with that. That's a Saturn cycle. That is one Saturn cycle. 28 years of essentially the same political continuum, uniparty. And now we have Hillary coming along, and she is the candidate in 2016 to run and continue that continuum for another 8 years. But no, they're not going to do that because it's a Saturn cycle. And somebody is going to come in and break the pattern. And that was Donald Trump. And I was forever grateful for Donald Trump to break the pattern. Good. And I don't think he had any love lost between the Bushes, as far as I can tell. Now, his inability to prosecute the Clintons, don't get me started on that. But I was just grateful that he broke that pattern. So to me, I'm like, good, great. This guy's all going to be about the energy. It's going to be about, he's a disruptor. That's all I care about. I'm ready to see the disruptive energy. But unfortunately, the disruptive energy trended into the red versus the black. Well, maybe, I don't know. Is that an apt metaphor? Perhaps not. But the disruptive energy was inverted, right? It was inverted on Trump. And I think that inversion really had a lot to do with the eclipse in 2017, which is right in his ascendant. Right on his ascendant. And he looked up into that eclipse sun, glasses off, right? He's kind of like Prometheus. He's Prometheus staring into the dark and distant fate of the eclipse sun, right on his ascendant, right? It takes Donald Trump to do something like that. That's what he did. Things did not go well. They didn't go well. I mean, if you really look at it, that sun at 28 degrees, Leo, right in his ascendant, conjunct his Mars. There's all these, there's all these weird kind of eclipsy kind of moments with Trump. He's born on a lunar eclipse, right? He's going to have really weird kind of faded moments, whether they're eclipse related or whether they're just, weird. Like, look at this, this thing that happened, right? The assassination. It happened in Butler, Pennsylvania. Butler, Pennsylvania was in the path of the eclipse, right? In April, all the Ninevehs. Well, Butler, Pennsylvania is on the eclipse path. And where's Trump? Well, he's in a city that was on the eclipse path. So he's like that. He's wired that way. He's going to have these strangely faded moments. It's the way it is. It's the way the guy's chart is. So again, I try to look at things from an objective, multi-dimensional perspective. And sometimes I will zoom in on a certain thing and I will break some shit down. And some people may not like that. Or I may go over here and I may break some shit down. And some people may not like that, right? But it's just the way it is. God bless this person. They sent me this link to this guy, Mark Rebelek. He's like this keyboard player, and he does all these crazy songs, crazy energy, right? He's kind of a wild man. And I remember watching this guy when he popped during the COVID in 2020. I'm like, man, this guy's fucking talented. He's talented. He's got energy. He's funny, right? He's got charisma. I'm like, this guy is cool. And then he does a fucking song about getting vaccinated. Okay. And I'm like, I can't go there. I can't go there. Like, this is 2020, and I'm putting all my energy into helping people stay out of the danger zone, right? Like, that's what I was dedicated to during that time. So this guy comes around and starts making fun of people and telling people to get the vax. I'm like, I'm out, right? I'm out. Yes, you're all talented and everything, but I'm just out. And I had this interesting conversation with somebody, probably listening to the show tonight. Interesting conversation with this person about, how sometimes we don't always have to agree on things. I completely agree with that. Completely. Todd Rundgren did a song called Tinfoil Hat. It was about Donald Trump. He and Donald Fagan did it, played it at his show. I don't know when he did it. I think after the election. And I love Todd Rundgren. I don't agree with him on the song, right? But I love Todd Rundgren. The difference between that song and the other guy's song is that Todd Rundgren is saying, hey, this is how I feel about this guy. And we made this video. And I'm going to play. If you don't like it, the way it is, right? You don't have to like it. You can reject it, whatever. I'll be back later. The difference between that and somebody else who is, doing a song about getting vaccinated is, in my estimation, kind of a big difference. Just a big, and this is no insult. This person doing some great work, interesting writing, but it's just the way it is. And I know some of you are like that as well. And your friends will go, "Well, why do you have to be such a downer? You're such a downer. You always have to bring that shit up. Why can't you just kind of go with it? Just go with it, man." Anyway. All right. Let's look at where we are now. Let's do a little. Time is 8:39. A little chart of the moment here. By the way, if you haven't read Whitney Webb's column on Peter Thiel, Palmer Luckey, Sam Altman, highly recommend it. It is extremely well researched. Let's see, what are we talking about? Okay, let's do this. Since this is where we are tonight. Let's see what we got here. Okay. Okay. So according to my calculations, the moon is now in Aquarius. How about them apples? Let's see. So Biden announced his resignation when? Let's see. Biden announces here, let's just do that. 8 hours ago, drops of the presidential race. Okay, so 8 hours ago. What's the timestamp on that? Let's see. Oh, come on. I don't need to be a part of your service. 8 hours ago. So it was all about 8 hours ago. This is the common timestamp. It's an update. Updated. No, I don't want the update. I don't want the update. I want the timestamp. It's important. 5 hours ago, 2 hours ago, 3 hours ago, 2 hours ago, 7 hours ago. Let's see what we got here. So they're updating the story as they go. All right. So what's 8 hours ago? We're at 8. So at 12:41 p.m. Let's do a chart for that. Let's do a chart for that as well. 12:41 p.m. Yeah, that was about right. I got up late today. I woke up to the announcement. People were chirping at me. Well, I guess if you wanted to go back to so according to my time estimates here, you'd have to go back to about 7:41 Central Time. And even before that, let me go back one more. So you'd have to go back to at least 6:41. Again, this is the ephemeris here, real time. Okay. So it's 6:41 a.m. And I'll show you guys what I'm talking about. So at 6:41 a.m., that's where the moon was at 29 Capricorn. Right there, right? 29 Capricorn. And we talked about that degree in the Sabian symbols. And just for you kids at home who are new to the show and don't necessarily remember it, we will show you the exact degree that I'm talking about. Okay. So this would be 9 degrees, leveled up to the next degree, which would be Capricorn 30. A secret meeting of men responsible for executive decisions in world affairs. That's where the moon was at 6 a.m., 6:41 a.m. Central Standard Time, 7:41 a.m. Eastern Time. So it's a very interesting degree of the moon. It is the last degree of what we would call the blue moon or the second full moon in the month of July. However, the moon is clearly in Aquarius now, and while it's still full, it is in a different sign. Right? It is not in Capricorn, but this phase 300, what's really interesting about this phase? And this is so weird, right? This is so weird because the Sabian symbols, Mark Edmund Jones, L.C. Wheeler, they did these back in the 30s. And everything was like a double blind. So, for instance, Mark Edmund Jones would have a 3x5 card, and he would have, let's say, Capricorn 30, which was really 29 plus, right? And so he would have that written down on a 3x5 card, and he would know that was there. And maybe the card underneath that was Aries 7, and then the card underneath that would be Virgo 22. Maybe the card after that would be Virgo 5, and the card after that would be Gemini 19, right? So they were not, he couldn't see him, she couldn't see him, and they were mixed up. He had already written the degrees down. So he's basically looking at the blank side of a 3x5 card. Blank side of a 3x5 card with the degree on the other side. So he says to L.C. Wheeler, somewhere in the shade in Balboa Park, over that prophetic weekend, that portal weekend. Okay, here you go. What do you got for this one? L.C. Wheeler. Mark, I'm sensing a secret meeting of men responsible for executive decisions in worldly affairs. I don't think she spoke English, but it just sounds better that way. And Mark says, okay, let's go over this now. And they sort it out. Boom, there it is. What's interesting is that this winds up being Capricorn 30, which is 29 trended up, and it's phase 300. Now, remember, right? Remember, this is happening in 1930. I'm going to show you something. John Coleman wrote a book. It's one of the early conspiracy classics. The Conspirators Hierarchy, the Committee of 300. Right? This is all about the 300 people who matter. Right? This is about them. And what do we have here? We have phase 300. There's a movie that talks about this, and it's a slightly interesting movie. It's not a great movie, but it's slightly interesting, and it's called Half Moon Street, and it's with Michael Caine and Sigourney Weaver. And Michael Caine plays a politician, and Sigourney Weaver plays an escort. And it's about kind of their affair and how it, is entangled with British government. And it starts off with a very interesting premise, gets sort of lost in a tepid love story, and then kind of resolves itself. But at the beginning of the movie, Michael Caine is sitting with her at this dinner, right? All these people. And he asks her, do you know how many people there are in the world? And, of course, she starts to think about like global population. And he says, no, there's 300. And then he breaks down by group how many people are actually making decisions by country and group, right? So this is a very interesting number. This is what happened. This was the same degree that Mars was at on election night in 2016. Mars was at this degree in Capricorn. I remember watching that Mars going, and I knew the degree. I knew this degree. And I'm like, man, they're going to make Trump president. That's what happened, right? That's what happened. Hillary was supposed to win that fucking election. She was supposed to win, and they said, let's let the votes count. Let's let the votes count. Or maybe somebody got in and, outrigged the riggers. That's quite possible. But there are two ways that I know this. The look on Trump's face after he won, he was shocked. I don't think he thought he was going to win. And the look on Hillary Clinton's face, which was pissed, pure evil, pissed, right? It was that 29th degree. Somebody basically said, okay, this is it. We're going with the votes. Same degree that happened early this morning. Same, maybe different group. I'm not saying it's the same group, but they made a decision. And it's like, he gone. But that was already happening. That was totally happening. That was already happening. Right? I mean, go back to once Trump magically dodged the bullet, whatever that thing was about, right? Then they were done. Their model was not going to work anymore. So it was just a matter of time. And then on Friday, when I looked at that Venus-Pluto opposition, the Widowmaker, and related that back to Joe Biden. And she's now a widow. I mean, literally, she's like, she has no more POTUS husband. She has no more Tony Burnell, her working husband. It's like she's widowed, right? So when I saw that Widowmaker, I'm like, oh yeah. Jill's going to be, she's going to be a widow. Now, this is really a sketchy time, right? It's a really, really sketchy time because we are a nation that is in transition, like big time transition rather. We have a lame duck president, if he wasn't lame enough already, whatever he was. We have a lame duck president. And if I was a foreign power, I would strike and strike fast. And this is, I think, a very critical time. And again, you say, well, it's all, scripted out and blah, 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 blah. No, that's not always scripted out. Not always scripted out. Just saying, right? There's always a scramble to who wants to control the levers of power. Factions, in factions. Just go back and look at this last eclipse that we had. If you don't factor in the October eclipse, what does it do? It cuts the country into 4 slices. Goes north, pretty much north-south, right? West-east, or south-north-west-east. And so I called it the quartering, right? The Great Quartering. So in the Democratic Party, you have a divided party, right? And then even like this whole issue around Israel, you won't get the quartering on the Republican side. They're all just pro-Israel, right? But you'll get it on the Democratic side, where you'll have a lot of people that are, pro-Gaza. And it's a problem. It's a problem. It split the Democratic Party in two. The Republicans are a lot more united around it, but the Republicans had their own issues with Trump because they're not all united around Trump. But they can't help it now because he's got all the momentum, and so they have to fall behind him. But that's what's happening. These parties or these in groups are being split down the middle. So it's a byproduct of the 2 eclipses. Anyway, so this is where we are now. Somewhere between waking up this morning at 6:41 a.m. with that moon at 29 Capricorn and where it is now at 8 degrees of Aquarius, it crossed Pluto. So we had a moon-Pluto conjunction, probably around 8:41 a.m. It's probably around the time I had a dream that my son was being arrested by the Department of Homeland Security. That was a total moon-Pluto conjunction dream, right? I was like, that's just what I need. Anyway, so I have a funny story about that. I can't tell it though. I can't tell it. I'll tell it. Oh, I can't. So I got the voice in my head. You can't tell it. Don't tell it. All right, I'll have to save it for the memoirs. Anyway, some of you know the story, but most of you don't. Anyway, so we have this moon. Right now we're at Capricorn. I'm sorry, Aquarius. Something happened. There was a phase shift, right? There was a phase shift from Capricorn crossing Pluto. Now it's in Aquarius. And so tomorrow we'll have the sun in Leo. Happy birthday, David Palmer, by the way. I believe it's his birthday tomorrow, right? Isn't he 0 Leo, if I'm not mistaken? I think or it's today's birthday. I forget. I just know he's 0 Leo. We're in a leap year, aren't we? So there's an extra day this year, right? So I think today is actually David's birthday, if I'm not mistaken. If Lynn is, I know some of you Astro heads in there will probably clarify that. But happy solar return, David. So yeah, something phase shifted with that moon crossing over Pluto, and I think that as it relates to the Democratic Party, you have to look at that, right? Because the moon is really prominent right now, and within I don't know what day and a half, roughly, that moon will be conjunct Kamala Harris's Saturn. So when is the DNC? Let me see. Democratic, so August 19th. So that's a ways off. I mean, that's really late in the season. It's really the end of Leo, right? So she's not going to ride the coattails, but that moon will conjunct her ascendant within the next 22 hours, 24 hours, 26 hours. And that might make her more prominent. It might make her more prominent. But on the other hand, because it's like it's almost like a full moon, like shining on her Saturn and also on her midheaven. But we also know that Aquarius brings surprises with it, right? Things don't always go according to plan. So I would say that this Aquarian moon actually bodes well for Harris in terms of her riding this momentum. And so I would definitely keep your eyes on 26 hours from now. The birth issue might come up with that moon conjuncting her Saturn. It might come up, but it all depends on how deeply insulated the media is, and it's really deeply insulated. Like there are so many connections with the Democratic Party and people in the Democratic Party sort of crossbreeding with people in media as husbands and wives, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're like big time internecine connections, right? They're there. So they could still insulate like her potential birth issue, but it could come up. And the challenge is that, we've been through this before with Obama, right? Like that's what Donald Trump sort of got him on the map, was he questioned Obama's birth certificate. And it was questionable, right? Everything about Obama was questionable, but the birth certificate clearly, and I don't think there isn't even really a birth certificate. There is a record of birth, which is different. And what was her name? Fuddy? Loretta Fuddy? Wasn't that her name? I think that's what her name was. Loretta Fuddy, the woman who was in charge of that in Hawaii. Like she eventually mysteriously dies. Like really, really weird shit. And wasn't she a member of Baha'i too, or something like that? I think so. I could be wrong. But so I think that'll come up and it'll be like, oh, here we go again. Right, shades of Obama. And I think Trump has to be, well, he's going to be Trump. You can't tell him what to do. The guy's just going to do what he's going to do. If he makes a big deal out of it, or he starts to poke around, then he's going to get the Obama birth certificate conspiracy theorist treatment all over again. So if Trump was smart, what he would do is he would get somebody else to do it and bring it up. Now, there's an interesting thought. Now, I wouldn't get J.D. Vance to do it because J.D. Vance is married to a woman from India, and Kamala Harris's mother is Indian. So I just think it's a little too close to home, maybe a little too weird. They can bark back and, well, your wife is Indian and da 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 da. So it couldn't be J.D. Vance, but somebody should bring it up if it is an issue, but neither of those guys. Neither of them. So they should have, I don't know, Tucker Carlson seems to be on the team. Maybe Tucker Carlson can bring it up. Maybe he could interview somebody who has some kind of a background with Kamala Harris and the birth certificate thing. And, oh, well, Tucker Carlson, isn't he a member of the Trump team? Right? You'd almost have to have it like maybe two people downstream, but they should bring it up. And I would not be surprised if I would be surprised if it wasn't brought up within the next 26 hours, between Monday and Tuesday, if the Harris birth record isn't brought up. Because if it is, they want to bury it and they want to be able to move on from it. So they have to bring it up in some ways, right? And I think probably if I was the Democratic Party and I had somebody who was, somebody played on both sides, right? One of their double agents, but we wouldn't know about that. Or we wouldn't know who that person was. That they would be like, so for instance, I know that, and I'm not saying that he is this guy, but if I was the Democratic Party, I'd want Alex Jones to bring it up. That would be perfect because you could basically bring up Sandy Hook and the whole thing and bring it down. That's what I would do. Now, is Alex going to go there? I mean, he doesn't even have to work for him. He just might be able to just go there, right? And just bring it up on his own. But that's, because they have these people. They have these people that are controlled opposition. You think that they're truth tellers, but they're really working for the other side. They're not really telling it. They give you a little bit of the truth. I'd say, hey, bring this up. Right? Bring it up so we can squash it. And then we can move on from it and get her, if that's where they're going to go. Now, there's another side to this. Again, we're just talking Kamala here. Remember, this moon is going to conjunct her Saturn, which is at 28 degrees, 29 degrees Aquarius. If you're the Democrats and you don't want her in the race and you want somebody else in the race, you could make a big deal out of the birth certificate thing. And then she would have to step down, and then you could do whatever you wanted at that point. And they've got a path. They've got kind of about a month path before they get to the Democratic convention, right? So they have basically less than 30 days to put all this together and to essentially scramble for Joe Biden's electorates. That's it. So I think the next 26 hours, about 26 hours, with that moon in Aquarius conjuncting Harris's Saturn, you're either going to have somebody on the right, theoretical right, bring it up, maybe reflexively, maybe they actually play for the Democrats, or they're a free agent and they swing both ways, bring it up so they can squash it. Right? If they're going to run her, they're going to need to squash it. They're going to need to have somebody who's not really respectable to bring it up. If Trump brings it up, they'll be like, "Oh, there he goes again. There he goes again. He did it with Obama. He's doing it again." It's not impossible. But if I were Trump, I would let somebody else bring it up. Somebody downstream. And I don't think it'd be I think that, to me, if Tucker Carlson did that, I think it would sort of tug his credibility a little bit. I'm not saying that it's not true, by the way, or should not be investigated or looked at. I think it should be. Everything's on the table. But I think Tucker is, I don't know, he should save his bullets for bigger game. You know what I mean? So I don't think Tucker should be the one to do that. So if you're on the Trump side, I don't know who you get to do it. Nick Fuentes. Nick would not do that. Anyway, let's see what else we got going on here. So we're about to go into Leo, right? And that Sun-Pluto opposition. That's a big one. We talked about that. That's intense, super, super intense. And that Sun-Pluto opposition, and I said this on Friday, it's like masks come off the tyrants. They come off the tyrants. And when is Netanyahu coming to Washington? Netanyahu to meet with Biden in Washington. Finally headed to Washington. Netanyahu is flying into a political tempest. Okay, here we go. It's Times of Israel. my God. I'm sorry. I'm just reading through this. All right. Here we go. The U.S. election, which was to unprecedentedly featured the first ever rematch between presidential candidates, had already strayed into unconceivable territory when GOP challenger Donald Trump survived an assassination attempt while speaking in Pennsylvania. In some ways, the political chaos in Washington could prove a blessing for Netanyahu. Ordo ab chow. First, it would appear to make it less likely that dozens of Democratic lawmakers will make a show boycotting Netanyahu's speech to Congress on Wednesday. With the party on its heels after Biden's widely expected but still shocking announcement, and intensely concerned over losing not only the White House, but also the Senate, Democratic leaders will want to avoid giving Republicans another avenue of attack while they already smell blood in the water. Moreover, Democrats don't stand to gain from an intra-party squabble over Israel while they try to rally the party behind Harris and discourage any challengers from throwing hats in the ring. They have a variety of carrots and sticks to ensure that fewer members boycott the speech and are likely to use them. In his public appearance with Netanyahu still set to go ahead of this writing, Biden is also less likely to focus on points of disagreement with Israel. He has nothing in the tank. Netanyahu can literally set the terms and conditions and would like to get a deal for the release of hostages held by Hamas wrapped up. Do we have any hostages? Really? Are they there? Are they really there? I don't know, man. I don't know. This whole hostage thing. I mean, seriously. Just trust your feeling body for a moment. Just trust your feeling body. You all have one. Feel into it. Feel into it. Are they there? Are there hostages? Are they there? What do you feel? You know what I feel? I feel nothing. I feel nothing. It feels blank, right? Like, where are the videos? Some of you are old enough to remember the hostage crisis in Iran. Like, people, they have recordings and shit that the American hostages were doing, paraded around, in their blindfolds, and they were just humiliated. And, theoretically, we have proof of life. Is there any proof of life here? There's just hostages. Anyway. Netanyahu's expected meeting with Harris, meanwhile, will now be held under massive scrutiny. Will give her the chance to show what path she wants to forge in relations with Israel. Okay. It also offers her a high-profile opportunity to burnish a presidential image in the minds of the public as she meets with OWN. Oh, come on, Times of Israel. You can do better than that. She meets with one of the world's best-known leaders, not as the public as she meets with OWN of the world's best-known leaders. Do better, Times of Israel, please. It's a very good opportunity for her, said Michael Oren, a former Israeli ambassador to Washington. Throughout the war in Gaza, sparked by Hamas's October 7th invasion and slaughter in southern Israel, Harris has been tasked with expressing views on Israel more in line with progressives. Yet there's plenty in her past to indicate that Harris, who had what she described as things like quite positive meeting with Netanyahu in Israel as a senator in 2017, is not instinctively critical of Israel. Well, she's theoretically married to a Jewish husband, right? She is. So maybe he's a neoliberal versus a neocon. Who knows? If she does become the Democratic candidate, Harris could well pick a running mate from the stable of pro-Israel Democratic governors, including Jewish day school graduate Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania. The prime minister's speech, of course, will be extremely closely watched. You bet your ass it'll be closely watched. If Netanyahu wants the headline, so he's coming to the United States to give an address to Congress. It's mind-blowing, right? It's really mind-blowing. Does Bukele get to come to the United States and address Congress? No. By the way, have you guys heard about Xi having a heart attack? That's if that's true, that's pretty significant. And I think I heard that I heard Zelensky had a stroke. Did you hear that as well? Whispers and rumors. Anyway, I just think it's weird, man. I think it's weird that Netanyahu, he's coming right to this country, right? He's coming right to Congress right after Biden steps down. And I think, to me, that's when the masks come off. That's that Sun-Pluto opposition, which, by the way, we will get easily for at least 3 days, right? We'll get it Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, that Sun-Pluto opposition. And it's like, oh my God, that motherfucker's a tyrant. How could I not see that before? How could I not see that? Well, the masks come off. Venus has moved out of the Widowmaker position. So it's no longer in opposition to Pluto, but the sun will be. You know what the sun in opposition to Pluto does? It makes kings and it kills kings. That's what it does. It makes kings and it kills kings. In Harris's case, does it make her queen? We'll see. We'll see. Again, I don't want to be dismissive of certain people, but I'll open my Scorpio rising trap. And this guy that predicted almost to the T the event that happened in Butler, this Christian pastor, prophet, whatever. Now he's got this vision of this woman who has blonde hair and it's tied up in a bundle, and she's going to try to assassinate Trump. And it's like, and he basically said, we need to look out for a woman who has blonde hair tied in a, like, everybody's going to start to look for this fucking woman. And it's like, oh my God, there's a woman with blonde hair in a bundle. I wonder if she's the potential Trump killer. Maybe it's her. It's almost oddly like a pre-crime thing. It's a little creepy. Because he kind of said that. We need to look out for a woman who has blonde hair in a bundle. So if any of you in chat have blonde hair in a bundle, be prepared. You are a suspect. You are on the blonde hair bundle watch list. Look at that. Neptune's gone retrograde. Saturn's gone retrograde too. Neptune's gone retrograde. Interesting. You know what Neptune retrograde reminds me of? It kind of reminds me of, my father used to do a lot of concrete work, and with stones. He was really, really good at it. Like those little tiny river rock pebble stones, right? He was really good at that shit. And he would set the concrete, he'd pour the stones in, and he would do this thing where, he would brush off sort of the upper layer of the concrete, right? The mix. And then the stones would emerge, and then they'd settle a little bit more to be a little more. So it was this process, constant process of, washing away the kind of the concrete, the detritus. And then eventually the stones would be at the right level in the concrete, and then they would sit there and they would be beautiful, right? To me, that's like this Neptune retrograde. Another analogy would be high tide. And whenever there's a high tide, and then it moves back out, what does it leave behind? It leaves things on the beach behind. And beachcombers love the high tide because they go down there after the high tide. Well, let's see what the water brought in. So to me, this Neptune retrograde is like that. So it's receding, And it's like, well, what's left in the wake of this like kind of Neptunian energy that's receding? It's like, oh, look at that. Look at that. Right. And I would not be surprised too if there are, we were looking at this video today. We didn't look at it, we just saw it. And there have been, I think, around 20 to 23 murders in Austin over the last 2 years. Like, there is a freaking serial killer in Austin. And I think it's connected to the smiley face killer or the smiley face killings, which they all wind up in water, right? There's always a water theme. They've got water in their lungs or they're near water. And it's like that Neptune retrograde moving backwards and like uncovering. I think what was it? It was one of the lakes in, I think, was it Lake Mead? It was one of these lakes in Nevada. And it got so low that they actually found bodies that were there that people had dumped in the lake. To me, this is what this Neptune retrograde is all about, right? It's like where the bodies are buried. Literally where the bodies are buried. Now, literally, metaphorically, where the bodies are buried. That to me is the Neptune retrograde. It's like, ooh, look, right? So if we look at it from a metaphorical sense, it's like, oh, yeah, here's the piece we were looking for. Here's the piece we were looking for. This is where the bodies are buried. Because it's moving away, right? It's moving backwards. And it's like this tidal energy that's going out. And again, it's like the process of the concrete. You just keep washing away, and then you see what's left, the form. So I think it's going to be a very interesting Neptune retrograde. Saturn's already retrograde in Pisces, and it's kind of this ongoing dance with Jupiter and Gemini. You can see that square right there, right? Bada bang. So we've talked about that, and it's sort of like, well, if you have you should only be spending money on the things that you need. I would not go overboard. And I also think it's one of those times where you probably will wind up spending money on the things that you need. Whether it's around your house or your car, it just feels like, okay. It's one of those like, all right, I got to spend this money. It's like, I just got this money. Now I'm going to spend the money. It's okay. It's okay. You don't want to get hung up on it. Don't get hung up on it. Like, just if you have to spend it, spend it. Let it go. I've been doing it myself. I've had shit that's happened. I'm like, my septic tank started to overflow a couple of weeks ago. It was $650. The way it is. It's just the way it is. I've got to spend it. So what you don't want to do is spend in areas where you don't have to. You want to, and if, by the way, if you have to spend the money, it's okay. Right? Just let it go. Bless it. It'll come back. Usually. The thing with money, and I've had to learn this, the more you get attached to it, the harder it is to keep it. The more you get attached to it, the harder it is to keep it. So let it go. Don't spend on anything that you don't need, though. That's going to be a theme going on with this Jupiter-Saturn square. Now, that said, if there is something, and I'd wait till we got these retrogrades with Saturn and Jupiter, so it's a little bit tricky. But if there is something that you do want to spend on, but it has to pay off in Saturnian dividends. It has to pay off in Saturnian dividends. What do I mean by that? It means that it has to pay off in a concrete and real sort of way. So, for instance, I'm going to invest in a fence in my backyard, which is very Saturnian, right? It's kind of like I'm putting up a boundary, which is what Saturn does. I'm going to put up a boundary in my backyard, and I'm going to invest in that because I have like these fences, like cyclone fences. One is a 3-foot fence, one is a 3-foot fence, and the other is a 6-foot fence. And the 6-foot fence, people put a fence cover on the other side of it, a privacy fence, but it's a little, not my idea of a fence that I want to look at. Hey, if they want to look at it, God bless them, their fence, their backyard, they can look at it. That's their Xanadu. That's their private Idaho. It's moving me to invest in a fence. Right? So, what do they call that? Defense? Anyway, all right. Venus is in Leo. Is there romance in the air? Look at this. Quintile Mars, sextile Jupiter, biquintile Saturn. It's the love boat. Venus sextile Vesta. Tell your grandma, tell your grandpa, tell your great aunt, tell your great uncle, tell them you love them. Take an old person out to lunch. Take a person who is a beloved elder out to lunch or out to dinner over the next couple of days. Let them know you care about them. Let them know you love them. Vesta in Leo. Right? Vesta, we get the word investment from Leo. It is the oldest of the asteroids. And it is the eternal flame that flickers back to you from the end of your existence. It gives you a bit of a portal as to your final days and where you want to invest in your final days, right? So we have Vesta conjunct Venus, and I completely am invested in what I'm saying about this. Venus sextile Jupiter. Don't let them buy the lunch. Don't let them buy the lunch. Don't let them buy the dinner. You take care of it, right? You have enough money. Oh, I don't know. I've got to get shocks for my car. Just do it. It's okay. It's really okay. Mercury coming in here, getting ready to move into Virgo. Boy, it's fast, Mercury. We're going to go into Mercury retrograde pretty soon too, right? That'll be interesting. But Mercury's in Leo, getting close to Regulus, and we've got a square going on with Uranus. Yes, indeed. Look at that. Mars has moved into Gemini. We should talk about that. So until Mars, hit the turbo when it conjuncted with Uranus, it was slow. Mars in Taurus is kind of plodding, right? It's kind of plodding until it gets up to speed. Mars in Taurus is like a rhinoceros. It's plodding. But once it gets up to speed, watch out. Like, Earl Campbell. But it has to get there. Now it's in Gemini. And holy shit, man. Mars in Gemini is fast. It's restless. It is fast and furious. Mars in Gemini, I've always said, is like a shark. It has to keep moving. It has to keep moving. Mars in Gemini, if you have it in your chart, if you slow down and you, rest for too long, you will get listless. You will get tired. People have Mars in Gemini, you got to keep moving. Keep on moving, right? So things are going to speed up tremendously. Tremendously. So we've got Kamala Harris, who is Gemini rising. That Mars is cruising through her 12th house. She might have to, fend off some political enemies with that Mars cruising through her 12th house. That's like a gauntlet for her. Once Mars goes through her 12th house and reaches her ascendant, I think her ascendant's pretty early. No, it's not. It's so if Jupiter is conjunct her ascendant on election night, I have her chart here, but I think it's around 2021 Gemini, so it's not quite there. But when Mars hits her ascendant, that's good, and that might be right around the election. Not sorry, the election. The DNC, right? It could be around. So we have a Mars-Pluto trine, and that goes into tomorrow as well. Wow. Wow. And then we're going to have a Mars sextile to the sun tomorrow. Tomorrow is a very interesting day energetically. Really, really interesting. I think tomorrow is one of those seize power kinds of day. Right? Like you will see, I think you'll see people just try to openly seize power. Like I think it's like it is on. And there's nothing like internecine conflicts, split factions, double agents, right? That's all Gemini stuff. And Mars and Gemini just takes it to another level. So Mars is squaring Mercury as well. And so again, we're just talking about the public space. And the Mercury-Mars square, Mercury-Uranus square, because it's getting, even though it's going into Virgo, it's in that fixed square. There are going to be people that in this arena that we're talking about, they're going to say things. Because remember, Mercury's in its detriment in Leo. So you're going to find people really, really like confident about what they're saying. And it's like, holy shit, did you just hear that? Did you hear what I heard? Like, did they really say that? Did they really say that? That's coming. It's kind of like when Joe Biden said the black man who is the Secretary of Defense, and then referenced Ketanji Brown. That's a minor version of what we're talking about because this is actually fractious. This isn't just a bumbling mistake. This is fractious. So for you out there, keep that in mind, right? These are fractious words. And again, fixed sign, we talked about that last week. Now, Mars and Gemini, it's mutable. It's Mercury. So Mercury ruled by Gemini, right? So things happen very quickly. And it's like, holding the words back into your mouth. So I wouldn't say practice a vow of silence because you really can't. You can't. But I would definitely, when I used to live in Oakland, I learned, not the hard way, I learned by observing that in certain parts of Oakland, if the light turned green, it didn't necessarily mean that you should go. Like, I would wait because I didn't know when it was going to happen, but it was going to happen. Invariably, you'd have somebody coming through that stoplight from the other side. It was clearly a stoplight. And I actually saw an accident happen one time when I waited. Like, man, that's what I'm talking about. If the light's green, wait a little bit. Just wait a little bit. That's all you got to do. Let somebody else make the accident. All right. All right, I think we're good. Got a little chart of the moment action there. All right, let's get into some of these other charts. Let's talk about Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel and JD Vance. They seem to be pretty connected. You know what I mean? Pretty connected. By the way, I have a theory about JD Vance. It would probably piss some of you off. So I'm not going to talk about it right now. See, I'm having my green light moment. I'm having my wait the green light moment. All right. Here we go. Here's the bros. The bros. We got a time on J.D. Vance. He's born at 8:11 a.m. Middletown. What an appropriate name for somebody like J.D. Vance, a place to be born in, Middletown. But look what county he was born in. Butler County. Where have we heard that name Butler before? Sounds like it's very, I don't know, familiar to me. Of course, it's Butler, Pennsylvania. No, I know it's just a mere coincidence. Mere coincidence, that's all. Born 8:11 a.m. That puts his son in the 12th house. So J.D. Vance's son is at 10 Leo, which puts it squarely on Trump's Pluto, which we'll look at in a bit. We looked at that before. He has Vesta, Juno, Venus all in the 12th house. So JD, the 12th house and the 8th house are fairly secretive. They're fairly secretive. Like there's a lot going on in these houses that we don't always know about. Yeah, 12th house sun people are interesting. He got elevated out of that 12th house sun, didn't he? And he's got his true node in Gemini and Chiron in Gemini in the 10th house. So true node in the 10th house. So he's going to be a public person. He will be a public person. In Chiron, you know, Trump's up there too. I think Trump's on his Chiron, isn't he? Let me see. We'll look. His Chiron is at 7 Gemini. I think that puts it. Is it conjunct his true node? I think so. And his true node is at 4 Gemini. So somebody like Donald Trump would propel him clearly into the 10th house, in his own 10th house. Chiron in Gemini is interesting. It's a little schizo, right? I mean, that's just the way it is, right? And what degrees is Chiron? 7, right? So, like he has a very unusual background, raised by his grandparents. So I'd say between the ages 6 and 8 was a very difficult time for J.D. Vance. And I don't know where he is on his timeline. Back then, he's probably going through some heavy shit. He came, look at his 4th house. He's got Mars in his 4th house. He's got Uranus in his 4th house. And part of J.D. Vance's quest is to leave the home and to get into that tent. That's pretty heavy. He's got Mars and Scorpio right on the IC. And Uranus, which is very unstable in the 4th house. It's not impossible, but it's unstable. His home life is unusual. He's raised by his grandparents. His mother, because she doesn't really raise him, probably winds up playing more the role of the sister with the moon in Libra in the 3rd house. And again, I don't know what his mother's sign is, but usually when the moon is in the 3rd house, the mother is more fraternal. That's the way it is, right? Same with Saturn. Saturn winds up becoming fraternal too, whoever becomes his father or whatever. Right? These are not the people that raise him. He's raised by his grandparents. So Saturn, the moon are the parents in the chart, and they're in the 3rd house, which means they're, again, more fraternal. He was probably more emotionally and psychologically adjusted. Do I have to come back? I think I have to come back. All right, don't go away. Consider this a break. I'll be back in a moment. Be right back. Don't go away. Ah. Okay, we're back. Thank you for your patience. Thank you so much for your patience. All right. What is significant about Peter Thiel's chart in relationship to J.D. Vance? Money, 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 money. It's got Pluto in J.D. Vance's second house. Right? Uranus is what? Technology. So JD started his financial capital company. JD Vance's life is totally scripted. Totally scripted. If you saw what I did last week, over on 50, so there's not always like crossover here. I have to remember that. JD Vance is the white Obama. I'm sorry if you really like the guy and believe in the guy and everything. I'm sorry. I'm taking a bird poop on it. He's the white Obama. Why do I say that? Because everything about his life is a mirror of Obama. Total mirror. First of all, he's raised by his grandparents. Obama, raised by his grandparents. The only thing he does that Obama doesn't do is he goes into the Marines for 2 years. But eventually, he matriculates to Yale, where at Yale, he becomes the editor of the Yale Law Review. Obama matriculates to Harvard, where he becomes the editor of the Harvard Law Review. Now, when J.D. Vance graduates, where does he go? He goes to the Sidley Law Firm. He goes to work for the Sidley Law Firm in Chicago, which is the same law firm that Barack Obama met Michael Michelle Obama at in Chicago. Same law firm. Okay, are you kind of getting the picture? You see the picture. Obama writes Dreams of My Father. J.D. Vance writes Hillbilly Elegy. And they both have memoirs at a very early age. Now, I don't think they made a movie out of Obama, but they made a movie out of J.D. Vance in his life, right? So he's following the same freaking path. The same path. Like it's a reflective path. And then they have a Pisces Vesica moment at the Sidley Law Firm, even though Obama's not there, right? It's the same law firm. So where J.D. Vance goes in a direction that Obama does not go in after. So Obama like kicks around that law firm for a while, and he goes directly into local politics. I think he runs for like alderman or whatever, right, in Chicago. J.D. Vance goes to Silicon Valley, and that's where he meets Peter Thiel. And that's when, like, not just anybody gets the invitation. So he starts his own capital company, his own financial capital bridge company, right? They're going to invest in whatever idea that he has. He's going to get investors to invest, right? That's what he does. Like that door just doesn't open to just anybody. It's like, hey, come on over here. I'm going to Silicon Valley. Well, I'll tell you what, you come on over here. We're gonna set you up. So Peter Thiel is a massive contributor to J.D. Vance's life. Right? Pluto, Uranus, tech, second house, Jupiter on his ascendant. And he's got so these guys are tight. I'm telling you, they're tight. And Vance has, he's got that Mars in Scorpio. So I can see why some of the women go, he's kind of easy on the eyes. Let me just tell you, I've seen some ugly motherfuckers with Mars and Scorpio. And they're like They're like the flame, and there's like a flame, and there's a moth, and it's Mars and Scorpio. Now he's kind of easy on the eye. No, he's got Mars and Scorpio. So what's interesting is that Thiel's Neptune is on. Now you're going to find this anybody from that generation, anybody born around Peter Thiel's generation, but you're not going to find Jupiter on the ascendant like that. And Pallas is really interesting there. It's really interesting. And Vance's ascendant is almost the same degree as Trump's. So it's like the king and the prince. So Pallas plays a very important role here about pattern recognition. So Peter Thiel is seeing like the potential of J.D. Vance. That's Pallas, right? He's looking at him saying, well, I could see this guy 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years down the road. And he's going to be very important in terms of what I want to do or what I can invest in him with. Well, why don't we have a collab? Why don't we have a collab here in Silicon Valley? And that's what's happened, right? So he has basically looked at J.D. Vance. Now, this is what, if you go into the Whitney Webb piece, it makes a ton of sense. Peter Thiel put a shit ton of money in Donald Trump in 2016. And Trump didn't really move the needle for Thiel in Silicon Valley very much. Didn't really move it very much. So I think Thiel was a little disappointed. Then he said, okay, how do we make sure that this guy moves the needle for us? Oh, we'll invest in J.D. Vance as well. So Peter Thiel is covering his assets by investing in a super PAC with Trump and Vance and making sure that they're getting his money so that theoretically when they get in, they can then essentially do Peter Thiel's bidding. Well, what is Peter Thiel's bidding? Why is he invested in J.D. Vance and Donald Trump? Well, why don't we do this? Let's take a look at Donald Trump's chart and Peter Thiel, shall we? Here we go. Trump on the inside. Look at that. Same deal. Pallas, Jupiter, Venus. He's got a Venus-Mars conjunction with Trump. They're lovers. That'd be pretty hot. Venus-Mars. I'm just saying. That's usually a pretty good connection for two people. But Trump, what's interesting, men and women, by the way. I don't want to be caught in the box, but usually that's the way it works. Trump would dominate Thiel, though, right? Thiel is all about making a deal, right, in the connection on the ascendant, but Trump would dominate him. And even if Thiel gave him a bunch of money, which he did with Trump's Mars there, he may say, well, I'm going to invest in Jared's project first. Right. But he's got the same effect on both of them, really. Oh, look, Pluto, Uranus, Trump's second house, tech money, Sun, Jupiter conjunction right there. So that's an easy, he's easy to relate there, right? Sun, trine. I'm sure they get along quite well. As long as Trump spends the money on what Peter Thiel wants him to spend it on. In both cases, you will see Thiel's Saturn in Trump's 8th house and also in Vance's house. So that is the power behind the scenes. Power behind the scenes. And if you follow the sort of the arc of what Peter Thiel and Palmer Luckey and Sam Altman and all these people are working on, is that they're working on next generation tech warfare. and drone surveillance. Like that's where the big money is. The big money is in military industrial contracts, complex contracts. Whitney Webb spells this out in her article. I'm not breaking any new ground. I'm just telling you that this is where they want to go. Right? The whole idea about the border is they want a virtual border fence. They want to employ drones. They really are part of this high-tech wet dream. Now, one of the things that is connected to like Palantir and all these other kinds of nodes that come in, Palantir is Peter Thiel's company, is the surveillance state. And Palantir plays a huge role in this whole idea of the surveillance state. And so that's another reason why they're heavily investing in Trump and Vance. Because if they get in, then they have the systems that they can switch on and become like incredibly lucrative for them. So you ask yourself, well, what do these people do with all this money? Because Peter Thiel's fucking rich. Like Palmer Luckey is the guy that created Oculus. He's fucking rich. Sam Altman's rich. Elon Musk is rich. And you ask yourself, well, what are they doing with all this money? How much more money do they really need? I mean, people like you and I, we had a couple of million. I'm like, well, I'm tapping out. I got 3 million. I could live quite easily for the rest of my life. Down in Belize. And I don't have to do anything. I can, whatever. Like most people are sort of like that. I'd probably be like that, although I might get bored. But not these guys. They're not like that. They're not like you and I. They're driven. But what drives them? Is it more money, more power, more influence, more power, more money? Like what really drives them? That's where we get to the breakaway society. Because I think these guys have a vision for the world that is very different for them and for us. Do I think that, they're the white hats? I'm not entirely sure. No. I'm not entirely sure. Although it would be interesting if that were the case. It'd be interesting if they used that technology and turned it on against, these assholes that we've had to be dealing with for thousands of years on this planet. Do you guys know about the sons of Belial and the law of one? Do you guys know about this? It goes all the way back to Atlantis. That there were two groups on Atlantis. The sons of Belial, who were, in my estimation, right, I think from what I understand, were from Sirius, 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 right? So they were very serious. They were serious. So you had this group, which is the sons of Belial, and then you have the law of one, whom, again, from what I understand, are Orion. They're Orion, right? They're like rebellious. They're like, come on, teacher, leave those kids alone. Like they believe that humanity should be able to manage themselves, right? The law of one says, leave them humanity alone, let them manage themselves. Sons of Belial says, no, they're like just like cattle. They have to be treated like cattle. They're like children. They're like cattle. So we have to basically ride them hard. And so these two groups theoretically have been kind of going at it throughout time. Be nice if Peter Thiel and Elon Musk and JD Vance and Donald Trump, like that they're those guys. They're the law of one guys. Be nice. And then they use their technology to ensnare the bad guys. And the sons of Belial are rounded up and we're off into the new age, and all that technology is there to catapult us. In Elon Musk's case, right off the planet to Mars. Have you, when you look at the Cybertruck, which looks like shit, but if you look at the Cybertruck, it looks like somebody's version of what a truck would look like on Mars, right? But it's really adolescent in a lot of ways. But let's say that that's not the case. Let's say they're not the white hats that we might think them to be, or even like them to be. Let's say that really what they want to do is they want to create a breakaway society. And what I mean by that is that there is a group of elites, super elites, but kind of like a version of the robber barons in a lot of ways. And the super elites have their own world. Right, like if you've ever watched They Live, right? There's a group of people in They Live that have all this technology. They're able to teleport from place to place, and then there's everybody else. And I think for me, that's what the Breakaway Civilization was like. Do they want to give everybody their technological gifts? Does Peter Thiel want to give everybody his life extension technologies so we can have how many billions of people just living forever, just like Peter Thiel? I don't think so. I don't think he's wired that way. So the ultimate outcome is this movie Elysium with Matt Damon and I believe Jodie Foster is in it. You guys know what I'm talking about? And they literally live off world. And, this is what their world looks like in Elysium. It's very unusual. And then they have these shuttles every now and then that go to Earth. And the Matt Damon character winds up coming up here and wreaking havoc. So in order to do that, right, in order to have that kind of a world, I'm not saying they're going to go off world, but that's the metaphor, the Breakaway Civilization. But it would almost be like this group of people living like techno gods in a techno-feudal society. And then everything is based on zeros and ones, which also includes, by the way, digital currency and CBDCs. So in order for that to happen, we'd have to have a collapse into the system. And all these guys are heavily vested in Bitcoin. So when the lights come back on, they've got all their Bitcoin in their lockers, and the lights come back on, and who's holding all the assets? It's guys like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and Palmer Luckey, right? Jared Kushner, because Jared Kushner got a shit ton of fucking Bitcoin. So it's kind of like the crash and the Great Depression. Now, will there be a Bitcoin dump before then? Maybe. But if these guys, they were in on Bitcoin at probably about 50 cents. Peter Thiel is in on Bitcoin about 50 cents. Maybe $1. And he buys easily for him back in the day. He could fart out $3 million in Bitcoin. How much do you think that'd be worth now? So this is kind of what I'm talking about. That if you're going to place your trust in these people, which I think is a lot of trust, right? You're going to have to trust them to theoretically be the counter opposition to the World Economic Forum and their version of 15-minute cities and everything else that has been going, right? You would have to trust that they would be the opposition to that. That said, right, that's a lot of trust, because you'd have to trust in whatever they would build after that, and that it would all, be in quote unquote humanity's favor. At the end of the day, right? At the end of the day, I think that these guys see themselves as Promethean characters, literally, stealing fire from the gods and investing in a system where they literally live like gods amongst us. Jeff Bezos is in the same group, same categories, part of the same breakaway civilization. It's a lot of power, a lot of money, a lot of resources. And again, it seems very centralized, right? So for instance, let's say Trump got elected and he said, I really want to improve our technological status and standing in the world. Let me get some really good ideas in here. Who can I bring who's got the best ideas? Well, he doesn't have to do that, because he's got Peter Thiel and he's got JD Vance and he's got all these guys from Silicon Valley with their companies that will bring them the ideas. They don't have to sit down and say, oh, well, is there somebody else out there that has a better idea? What do you mean better idea? What do you mean? This is it. We've got the ideas. We have all the technology. Why do you want to entertain anybody else's ideas? Well, because it's America. And America's a meritocracy. Maybe somebody's got a better idea than you. Right? So this is the thing that I'm talking about. So if you go down this path, you have to trust these guys. You really have to trust them. So I guess who else are you going to trust? The other side? Maybe you should just trust yourself. Maybe you trust yourself and you trust God, and you let the chips fall where they may. So I think this is at the very least interesting, because he wields a tremendous amount of influence in both these guys' charts and lives. All right, let me do this. Let me do a quick Trump Vance thing, so you guys can get a look at that. So let's go Donald Trump. Let's see, where is he? Right there. And then let's see. Let's do JD Vance. All right. I'm just going to leave it here. All right, here we go. All right. So this is Vance's Pluto. Right there. Right there. I'm sorry, it's Trump's Pluto. That's Vance's sun. Right there. If Donald Trump gets reelected and he takes the oath of office and JD Vance is his vice president, my prediction is that Trump will not finish his term and that JD Vance will take over. That's my prediction. And it's the Sun-Pluto conjunction. Something happens to Trump, maybe 3 years. If we're going down this path, 3 years. And then Vance is there. Right? So where does that put us? 2028, next election. That's my sense. Now, do they work together fairly well? Yeah, sure. Again, you get that Venus-Mars conjunction. All three of those guys, like he's got Venus in Leo, Thiel's got Venus in Leo, and they're all kind of clustered around Trump's Mars, sort of like, three peas in a pod. Vance's Mercury is in Trump's first house. So again, I'm being agnostic here in terms of the astrology. So, whatever these two guys are about, whatever the Breakaway Society is about, this has nothing to do with that. I think JD Vance becomes a very good, if they go down this path and he becomes, the vice president, he will be an excellent spokesperson for Trump. No doubt about it. Like, this is not Mike Pence at all. One of the things that Mike Pence had in his chart was Pluto, I believe, at 0 degrees Virgo. So his Pluto was right on Trump's ascendant. And I remember seeing that going, you gotta be fucking kidding me. This guy's Pluto is on Trump's ascendant? Good luck with that, Trump. Good luck, and Mike Pence did him no favors over those 4 years. Mike Pence theoretically ran Operation Warp Speed. Like, Trump put him in charge of that. Mike Pence was the Jan 6 guy. And he turned on him. Totally turned on him. He wasn't even at the Republican convention. So I think this is way better in terms of a personality for Trump to deal with. But that Sun-Pluto conjunction. And the other thing, too, is that transiting Mars is going to pass through Trump's 12th house. I do think there's going to be another assassination attempt on Trump. And it's that Mars-Pluto conjunction. And I'm going to tell you when that is. Okay, so we've got Trump's Mars is at or Trump's Pluto, my bad, is at 10 Leo. So we're looking at Mars 10 Leo. Oh, lucky. Lucky, lucky, lucky. Lucky, lucky, lucky. All right. So Mars goes into Leo election night. Wow. That's some dramatic shit. 0 Leo on election night. It's interesting. So pay attention to what happens tomorrow. Pay attention to what happens tomorrow. Because whatever happens tomorrow with the sun at 0 Leo and Mars at 0 Gemini and Pluto at 0 Aquarius, whatever happens tomorrow on 0 Leo is very telling and probably gives us a hint as to what will transpire on election night. Okay. It doesn't quite go into Trump's 12th house. Now, that said, it will run the gauntlet through his 11th house. And I would say probably the most critical degree for Trump would be his Saturn-Venus conjunction. So Trump has Saturn at 23 Cancer. And let's see. Transiting Mars would be at 23 Cancer on Friday the 18th, Saturday the 19th. Those would be days that I would look out with Mars. Venus goes into Sagittarius. Wow. It's way out there, Venus and Sagittarius. Way out in front of the sun sign, October. By the way, October 3rd, the 4th, 5th, 6th, actually it's the 5th, 6th, and 7th, we're having our event in Kerrville. If you go to my Twitter page or you go to Locals, all the information is there. Right, I've got it all listed on Locals. Click through, right, all the stuff, all the goodies, it's all there. And we're going to have Mario from Symbolic Studies, Darlena, all you Darlena fans, taking her human design class. She's going to be there on Sunday. I'll be giving a presentation. We got DJ Pebbles making some music for us on Saturday night, and I got a few other things happening. And Mario Symbolic Studies has the most elegant presentations. Elegant. So the theme is Return to Venus. And the whole idea for us is to be harmonized and energized when we go back into the world. So just if you're a member of Locals, it's all there. It's on my Locals page. If not, I urge you to join my Locals page. The link is in the description. And I got an event coming up next week where with the Locals people, I'll be getting into more of this. It's going to be a members only event. So you can follow me on Locals. I have non-member content and I have member only content, which like a lot of Locals people do. So our next meetup is going to be members only. And by the way, everybody who signed up for Locals, thank you. I really appreciate it. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you for supporting the show. And thank you for supporting the work. Anyway, if I were Trump, I'd put that day on my calendar. I would definitely put that day on my calendar. Mercury goes into Scorpio during that time as well. Interesting, very interesting period of time. Saturn, of course, is retrograde. But really, we're looking at Friday the 18th. Friday the 18th. Mars won't go back into Leo into his 12th house until next year. I'd still pay attention to that if I was the old Trumpster. All right. Why don't we do this? I'm going to get into the my dark horse candidate for the president of the United States. Here we go. I still have odds on Mike Johnson. But I think there's a new name on the Democratic side that people may want to pay attention to. Are you ready? Are you ready? Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Now, they have talked about him as potential presidential candidate for a long time. He met with Lloyd Austin last year, and he would not back Joe Biden. Didn't want to endorse him. It was San Leandro, home of the famous Rickies. So what's it looking like here for Mr. Johnson? Who's a rat? Does he look like a rat? He looks like a rat. Okay. Sun, 12 degrees Taurus, which is very much like. Okay. Remember, we talked about what? Mars and Gemini? Oh, where's that Mars? It's going to be right there in Mr. Johnson's chart, going through the 8th house. It's going to conjunct Saturn, and he's going to have a Mars return. It's funny, this Venus-Mars conjunction, there's a bunch of pictures of him in drag. It's just part of the Venus-Mars conjunction. I'm not making any value judgments, but there's lots of pictures of the Rock, the Rock in drag. So does this Mars transit? Let's just take a look at this. Does this Mars transit, especially in the 8th house, power behind the scenes, right? Could it elevate the Rock into the race? We've got about a month, so we should have a rockometer. Now, remember that Mars is eventually going to hit that midheaven. His midheaven is the same degree of Trump's Saturn, by the way, pretty much. It'll hit his midheaven, and then it goes to 0 Leo on election night. Now, if I were an astrologer, which I am, I would say, hey man, if you're into this president thing, this would be pretty good for you, right? This could be your time if that's what you wanted to do, and people want it. Like The Rock, he doesn't have any. Look, they just brought out Hulk Hogan, and not that Hulk Hogan is running for president, but if you're going to outdo Trump, I'd bring The Rock. Now, at the very least, he will probably have a prominent position in the Democratic Party, but he's no dummy. He's not going to just back anybody. But I think it could be pretty interesting, especially with this Mars transit going through his 8th house, where there's a lot of moving and shaking behind the scenes. Mars return, Mars in Cancer, and then on election night, that Mars is right there, bang on 10th house, 0 Leo. I mean, when I look at his chart, that to me is probably the most prominent aspect. Pluto does retrograde, and on election night, Pluto will be on his true node. It's the last time Pluto will be, close to his true node, which is at 2859 Capricorn. And on election night, I can tell you where that true node's going to be. It's going to be at 2947 Capricorn. So 2859, less than 1 degree off of the Rock's true node. That's where Pluto's going to. Look, if this guy ever wanted to be president, let's see, we've got 3 years of Saturn in Aries, 3 years of Saturn in Taurus, that's 6, 3 years of Saturn in Gemini, so he goes through the Saturn return, that's 9, and then 3 years of that, basically 2.5 years of Saturn in Cancer. So that'd be 11.5 years from now, almost 12. So if The Rock wanted to wait 12 years to become president, if that's what he wanted to do, then that would be probably the ideal time. But does he, is this a guy that, I mean, let's play this out. He has absolutely no experience at being president, or even holding an elected office. But neither did Donald Trump. Trump ran these companies and, did all this shit. The Rock has been one of the owners of, with the UFL or something like that. So he's got business interests. He's got a shit ton of money. He's an actor. And Trump was an actor too. I mean, Trump was in movies. Trump was in WWE. So, I mean, certainly there's some qualities here. It would be very interesting if you were the Democratic Party, let's think about this for a second. Who do you think would get more legitimate votes against Donald Trump? Kamala Harris or Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson? I think it would be Dwayne Johnson. I think more people would vote for The Rock than they would vote for Kamala. That's my, and you would even get people kind of on the middle right, like, oh man, look at this guy. You know, he's going to be the face of the Democratic Party. And what's interesting about The Rock is that he's mixed, right? His father was black, wrestler. Mother was the daughter of Peter Maivia, who was a contemporary wrestler. A daughter or sister, I forget which, but it's connected to Peter Maivia. It might be the sister. I think it's the sister. Daughter would be too young. It's the sister of Peter Maivia. And Peter Maivia was a famous Samoan wrestler. Him and his brother were famous wrestlers in the California wrestling circuit. So Rocky Johnson, the Soul Man, I believe married Peter Maivia's sister, and they begat The Rock. Right? Like, that guy is fucking famous. And they can say, well, he doesn't have any experience. They can say, well, Trump didn't have any experience either. Now, does he want to get into the messy business of debating? Is he a guy that can even debate? Like, do you want The Rock debating policy? I don't know about that. If he didn't have to debate, I'd if I can run him. Not that he's unintelligent. Like, he's, you know, I think he's a fairly smart guy. Smart enough not to know to back Biden. I don't know. What would be the odds? Let's see. Let's just look at right now. Let's see what the odds are. Odds checker. This is from September of 2022 or 20. Let me just see this. When is this? Yeah. Okay, 2024 U.S. presidential candidate Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson has a 22% chance to become the next president. Wow. Those are pretty high odds. That's going back to 2022. So on April 5th, he said no. If you go back to Newsweek of April 7th of 2021, 46% of the people wanted The Rock as president. He says no, but 46% of the people said they would vote for him. I don't see any new betting odds. Let me just see here. See if there's any news around that. Hold on. This is from 2023. Now, if you believe the Washington Post from 2023, oh man, come on. Says, who can beat Donald Trump? The Rock. Let me show this to you. See that right there? This is from 2023. 2024 presidential odds, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's odds to win the presidential election. Notice he's always with military people, right? Always with military people. Not always, but handshakes and eyes mean everything to me, as I know they do to this man as well. General Randy George, Chief of Staff of the Army, Pleasure to meet with you, General, and thank you for welcoming us to DC to meet you and your fellow generals, General Deb Kotelich, General Laura Potter. Looking forward to working with you and your team on the task at hand, whatever the fuck that means. As always, thank you for your service. I'm sending you the bill for all the selfies I had to take in the Pentagon after a meeting. $7 plus tequila. See you soon, sir. Right? So before those events in the past month, The Rock was 500 to 1. Now he's 250 to 1. I don't know. If I were the Democrats, I just know that The Rock would get more votes than Kamala. But then how do you position that? How do you position it? If anything, he'll be, I think, a major player at the Democratic convention. All right. Well, boys and girls, it's 10:23 here in Austin, Texas, 11:23 in California, and the East Coast. Some of you East Coasters want to sneak off and catch some Z's. I think it's time to do that. I think it's time to do that. I think it's time to pull the train into the station. And I want to thank each and every one of you for being here this evening. Don't forget, I am a working astrologer. So if you'd like to book a reading with me, I don't often toot the old horn here, but I'll do this just kind of because I'm not very good at self-promotion. I got to say, it's the Virgo in me. But I do these stars of the day for people. And I just did one for somebody who I have a connection with through Twitter. And I said, she said, will you let me know when you sent it? I said, yes, just now. Your mom's chart is quite interesting. I hope I got it all right. She said, thank you. The reading was spot on. She loved it. So that's really like a 25-minute reading that I do for people for birthdays. It's a really great gift if you want to if you want to give somebody a really unique gift. I do the star of the day for people. So you can go to my website, order that up, and all you got to do is, reach out just like a regular reading and contact me. And happy to do that. And I'm pretty good at turning them around pretty quickly. I did this one in about 72 hours. I just have to go through the workload, right? I think that's about it. Don't sleep on the event in October. It's going to be great. I can feel it. I can feel the excitement. I can feel the surge. I'm trying to work out one more guest speaker and maybe an offsite. So I usually have something up my sleeve that I surprise people with. So I think that's it for tonight. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for supporting the show. And treat each other well. God bless you all, and good night.